We're into the semi-finals of the Opera Euro Rapid tournament, and I'm going to take a look at a game in the match between Wesley and Teimour Radjabov. I actually think that, the winner of this match is the favourite to win the tournament, considering that Magnus Carlsen really is in variable form, let's put it like that. And besides, So and Rajabov have proved themselves in rapid play over the last few tournaments. We know they are, they're superb players full stop, but in rapid play in particular, they have been doing really well. Of course, Wesley So won the Skilling tournament, the first of the Play Magnus online tournaments. So this is game 3. They'd already traded wins. It's 1-1 going into this third game. And Wesley plays this Rossolimo variation, bishop b5, and goes for c3 and d4. This is the old way of playing this line, and I was really keen to look at this because this is exactly how I used to play it with white. And I used to have fantastic results with this system. Here, Rook e1 played. If you're interested in a very nice gambit that is terrifying for your opponents, then that is not bad. That's worth a look. Anyway, I used to shock a few players for that one. But Rook e1 is the main move. And that's the one that I settled on eventually after my wild youth. d4, and the old main line here is taking, and then here a knight c3, and that actually gave white pretty good chances. But d5 was a subtlety, and this is the way that is played now. So you can see the knight can't come to c3, but well, the main move here is to actually play knight d2, or at least take here and then play knight d2. But recently, in the last couple of years, bishop e3 has come to prominence. If you flick on a computer, then you will see that bishop e3 is the recommended move, and that's why all the top players have started playing this move, basically. So takes, queen b6 and queen c1. So white is basically controlling the c5 square and preventing this break. So that is really important. If white can keep that pawn on c6, then he's got something to play for, and also might be able to use that c5 square. And both these players have experience with this line. So in some ways, white has achieved quite a lot here because the knight has gone from e4, c5 has been prevented, and yeah, you can see this bishop isn't up to much on g7. This bishop, well, it could be useful, but it's not quite clear where. Previously, Rajabov has played bishop g4 here, but instead he goes for bishop f5. And that's pretty reasonable. Thing is, with bishop f5, it guards the b1 square, so it's not so easy to defend that pawn once the rook comes over. Rook b8, knight d2. And here Rajabov plays h5, which sort of looks to secure that bishop, but I think a much better move is to play a4 in this position, just to create a weakness here, or possibly a2 as well, depending on how white recaptures. I think a4 is the move. Geary has played that with white and succeeded in winning against Lay, but well, he really had to squeeze out to win. I think black should have been okay there. But after h5 and h3, okay, useful move. Yeah, a4 is still possible, but here is where Rajabov kind of bottles it and starts playing passively. Rook c8. I don't like at all. You know, I feel a4 had to be the move. Because after this, well, white starts to get control over the queen side. Bishop f8 played, that bishop isn't doing much, and now a3. So that means if black pushes with a4, then b4 and the pawn is completely clamped. Rook b8, but that pawn is defended. Queen b2, queen d8, so you can see black is going backwards, and now Wesley's just done a little bit of regrouping and he's able to double on the c-file. And this is looking already, I think, very pleasant for white. I mentioned this bishop before. This is a problem because, of course, you would love to be able to play e6 to bring that bishop into play on this diagonal, but that makes these squares so weak, really unpleasant. So f6, now that's slightly different because if white were to exchange here, then you see those squares are covered and that bishop looks down the diagonal and that looks pretty nice for black. But of course, there is no need for white to exchange on f6. Rook c5 played, good move. And now I was imagining some kind of exchange sacrifice if black were ever to exchange here and go e6, because even if that's taken, then this bishop would be rampant on those dark squares on the king side. So yeah, still really problematic taking here. Rook b5. Obviously Wesley was intending to take on a5. a4, rook takes, so still a potential threat here. And this is very unpleasant for black. If rook a8 defending, then queen c3 hits the pawn, but also hits c6. Now, it is possible to take here and play e6 to give that pawn up and hope to get some counterplay. But, well, even if that pawn is pushed, then it's not going to get further than d3 because there's a good blockading square and, well, the bishop looks good on the dark squares. But maybe that is a way for black to try and stir up some trouble. Well, Rajabov wanted to stir up trouble in a different way. You know, he's a very practical player, very pragmatic. And he could see that with white's pieces stuck on the queen side, way over across the other side of the board, then the piece sacrifice on the king side is worth a punt. He also understands that his king is actually very safe. And white's king, well, this is tricky. And it'll cost time for white to try and find, you know, accurate defensive moves. Having said that, Wesley, I tell you what, he's an absolute beast. He didn't hesitate much and found some excellent defensive moves. Knight f1 looks completely normal, but there is a little bit of calculation behind this. If queen g4, this didn't happen, but if queen g4, knight g3 is possible, because after h4 you can swing the queen across to exchange queens or drive black's queen backwards. So knight f1 just played, pawn takes pawn, and bishop g7. So Rajabov is looking to get counterplay in a different way, putting some pressure here, perhaps hoping that Wesley will guard the pawn with f4, but then g5 stirs up trouble, and once that f pawn is advanced, the king is a little bit more insecure. So queen d4 from Wesley, and that covers the g4 square, so no longer a decent check on g4. I have to say, Wesley played this very calmly. Wasn't spending too long over his moves, but was coming up with some excellent moves at the same time. So queen e6, the queen came back. And once again, the move that white wants to play is f4 to shut out that bishop. But then the queen bounces back in. And this is getting tricky again. So I have to say, I thought Wesley's next move was very cool indeed. You know, it seems as though Rajabov has managed to create some trouble here. But he just took the pawn on a5. And that takes real guts to give up that centre pawn, allow the bishop back in. But actually his queen has rejoined the king side. So the king is actually more secure now. That's the good news. Rook f8. Rajabov trying to stir things up. Rook a7. But Wesley is kind of connecting these pieces. You know, now e7 is under fire. Bishop d6. Still quite tricky. You know, black's pieces are very active here. b4. I mean, this takes real guts to play like this. Rook f3. So Rajabov perhaps looking to get in rook h3. But now the counterplay comes. Rook a8 check. And bishop h6, threatening a mate in 1. This is good play. Queen e2 makes room for the king, but Wesley can snap the rooks off. And then he brought the bishop back to an excellent diagonal. So the basic idea is he wants to push that a pawn. So that's why he snapped that pawn off some time ago. So Rajabov decides, okay, I can bring the king over to stop that pawn. So clears the king out of the way as well. And here Wesley makes a really committal move. And he does so very quickly indeed. But I have to say, his judgment was absolutely spot on. Bishop c5. He just wants to trade pieces, to trade down, to eliminate any risk. And that bishop is holding black's pawns together. I mean, this looks a little bit scary. You know, you'd think the pawns are split now. Perhaps black can get one of those. But actually, it's good judgment because white is actually getting counterplay here. The queen threatens the pawn. The queen might be able to support the pawn over on this side of the board. And the knight is able to defend the king against perpetuals. Bishop f4 played by Rajabov. Queen takes pawn. So Rajabov is hoping to get some counterplay here. Queen g4. So the knight has to block. But Wesley has calculated this out. I mean, this takes real guts because apart from bishop takes knight, which was played in the game, you have to look at h4 and check that white is actually forcing the decision on the other side of the board. It is winning for white. Let's just have a very quick look. But this is not entirely simple. Well, this is probably the most straightforward of all the variations. But black can do better than that. King c7, check. And now b5 actually forces a win. After this, and well, basically white gets there. That's mate. I mean, there are other variations, but basically Wesley has crunched it out after h4. White is winning. But he played this very quickly. And maybe he just kind of judged it that he had to be winning that position at the other end of the board. But, well, fine judgment. Anyway, Rajabov went in for this, hoping that something's going to turn up. But actually, the king is able to march all the way up the board. It's crucial, actually, that everything is defended. So there's no unfortunate skewers or, picking up a loose piece. King d6 will do the job as well, but king f6 played. That's also fine. If there's a check here, then the king will hide on g7, and then it's white's turn at the other end of the board. It's winning, basically. So king f6, queen takes. And again, this had to be calculated carefully, but Wesley had done it. h3, okay, a little bit scary. I think we ought to stop that one with the bishop. Black's only chance, push the d-pawn. King takes c6. Keep pushing. a6. Now, if d2, then a7 and mate next move. So king b8. And now it's time to push the b-pawn. Check. King c8. You get a queen a8. And after this, b6, that was the end of the game. Obviously, if black gets a queen, it's mate with b7, that bishop, fulfilling a very useful role at that end of the board. Great stuff, great game. And I tell you what, these two players are so tough in rapid play. This was the third game. The fourth game was a draw. So Wesley won the first set. But, well, I wouldn't put it past Rajabov coming back tomorrow. It's going to be extremely close. But Wesley, I have to say, what a class act. Because he like I think all the best players in the world, they take big decisions very quickly just on judgment alone. Brilliant stuff from Wesley. So don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting us on Patreon. Do become a patron of the channel and check out the rewards as well. Thanks for watching.